still remember the exact moment I realized I didn't belong in the Morgan household. I was 7 years old, standing in the hallway of their pristine Connecticut mansion, clutching a Mother's Day card I had made at school. Construction paper, glitter glue, and crayon hearts. I was so proud of it. Victoria Morgan stood at the top of the marble staircase, her silk robe flowing like she was posing for a magazine cover. She looked down at me with those cold blue eyes and said something I would never forget. "You're not really my daughter, Emma. You know that, right? You're just someone we're helping out. Don't get confused about what this is." I was too young to understand the full weight of those words, but old enough to feel the knife they carried. I dropped the card on the floor and walked away. She never picked it up. My name is Emma Clark. Or at least, that was my name before the Morgans adopted me when I was 5. My biological mother had died in a car accident, and I had no other family. The state placed me in foster care, and somehow, by some twist of fate, the Morgans chose me. I thought I had won the lottery. Richard and Victoria Morgan were the kind of people you saw in Forbes magazine. He ran a successful investment firm in Manhattan. She was on the board of every charity in Greenwich. They lived in a house that looked like it belonged in a period drama, with chandeliers, Persian rugs, and a staff that included a housekeeper, a gardener, and a private chef. But I wasn't their daughter. I was their charity project. They had a biological son, Preston. He was 3 years older than me, and from day one, he made sure I knew the difference between us. He got the master bedroom on the 2nd floor with the view of Long Island Sound. I got the small room in the back, next to the laundry. Preston went to elite private schools, took sailing lessons in the summer, and had a trust fund waiting for him when he turned 18. I went to the local public school, wore hand-me-down clothes from Victoria's friends' daughters, and was told repeatedly how grateful I should be. And I was grateful. At least I tried to be. I tried so hard to earn their love. I cleaned my room perfectly every day. I got straight A's. I never asked for anything. I smiled at their dinner parties when they introduced me as their adopted daughter, the one they saved from the system. I played the role they wanted me to play, but it was never enough. Victoria criticized everything about me. My hair was too wild. My laugh was too loud. I didn't sit like a lady. I ate too fast. I didn't understand the social graces that came naturally to people like them. Richard barely noticed I existed. He worked late most nights, and when he was home, his attention was entirely on Preston. They talked about stocks, business strategies, legacy. I might as well have been invisible. The only person in that house who treated me with any kindness was Margaret, the housekeeper. She was a soft-spoken woman in her 60s from Dublin, with warm eyes and hands that smelled like lavender soap. She would sneak me cookies after dinner and tell me stories about her own children back in Ireland. "You're a good girl, Emma," she would say. "Don't let them make you think otherwise." But they did. Every single day, they made me feel like I wasn't good enough, like I was an inconvenience, like I was lucky they even tolerated me. When I turned 16, things got worse. Preston had just gotten into Yale, and the house was filled with celebration. Victoria threw a party that felt like a coronation. I helped serve drinks to the guests, dressed in a simple black dress that Victoria had picked out for me. One of the guests, a woman dripping in diamonds, looked at me and said, "Oh, how wonderful that you've given this girl a chance at a better life." Victoria smiled that practiced smile of hers and said, "Well, we do what we can. It's important to give back." I wanted to scream. I wanted to tell that woman that I wasn't a charity case, that I was a human being, that I had feelings and dreams and a right to be treated with dignity. But I didn't. I just smiled and refilled her champagne glass. That night, lying in my small room, staring at the ceiling, I made a promise to myself. One day I would leave this house. I would build a life of my own, a life where I mattered, where I wasn't just someone's good deed. I just had to survive until I was 18. I had no idea that everything was about to change in ways I could never have imagined. 2 years passed like a slow torture. I turned 18 in March, 3 months before my high school graduation. I had been accepted to the University of Massachusetts on a partial scholarship. It wasn't Harvard or Yale, but it was mine. I had earned it with my own grades, my own essays, my own effort. I told the Morgans about it during dinner one evening. Richard was cutting into his steak, barely listening. Victoria was scrolling through her phone. Preston was there too, home for spring break from Yale, looking bored. I got into UMass, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. I start in the fall. Victoria glanced up, her expression unreadable. That's nice, Emma. Have you thought about how you're going to pay for it? My stomach dropped. I have a partial scholarship. I was hoping maybe you could help with the rest. Just for the first year until I can get more financial aid or find work. Richard finally looked at me. His face was cold, businessman-like. Emma, you're 18 now. Legally an adult. We've provided for you for 13 years. I think that's more than generous. You'll need to figure this out on your own. Preston smirked into his wine glass. Guess the free ride is over. Huh? I felt my face burn with humiliation and anger. But I kept my voice calm. I understand. I'll figure it out. Victoria set down her fork and looked at me with that familiar expression of mild disappointment. You know, Emma, we took you in when you had nothing. We gave you a home, an education, opportunities most foster children never get. And you've never once truly appreciated it. I have appreciated it, I said quietly. Every single day. She shook her head. No, you haven't. You've walked around this house like we owed you something. Like you were entitled to the same things Preston has. But you're not. He's our blood. You're not. Those words hung in the air like poison. Preston was grinning now, enjoying every second of my humiliation. Richard had already gone back to his steak, the conversation clearly over for him. I stood up from the table, my hands shaking. Excuse me, I said, and walked out of the dining room before they could see the tears forming in my eyes. Margaret found me 20 minutes later, sitting on the back steps of the house, crying into my hands. She sat down beside me and put her arm around my shoulders. Oh, love, she whispered. I'm so sorry. I don't know what to do, Margaret. I have nowhere to go. No money. No family. She squeezed my shoulder gently. You're stronger than you know, Emma. You'll find a way. You always do. But that night, lying in bed, I didn't feel strong. I felt completely alone in the world. Unwanted. Unloved. Disposable. I had no idea that my entire life was about to turn upside down. 3 days later, everything changed. I was in my room, filling out loan applications on my laptop, when Margaret knocked on my door. Her face looked strange, pale and uncertain. Emma, there's a man downstairs asking for you. A lawyer. A lawyer? My heart jumped into my throat. What could a lawyer possibly want with me? I followed Margaret down the stairs. In the foyer stood a man in his 50s, wearing a gray suit and carrying a leather briefcase. He had kind eyes and a gentle smile. Miss Emma Clark? He asked. Yes, that's me. My name is David Whitman. I'm an attorney from Boston. I've been looking for you for quite some time. Is there somewhere private we can talk? We sat in the library, away from the prying eyes of the Morgans. Mr. Whitman opened his briefcase and pulled out a folder thick with documents. Emma, I represent the estate of your maternal grandmother, Eleanor Clark. I stared at him, confused. I don't have a grandmother. My mother died when I was 5. She had no family. That's what you were told, he said gently. But it wasn't entirely true. Your grandmother was very much alive until 6 months ago. She passed away in December at the age of 78. I felt like the room was spinning. Why didn't she ever contact me? Why didn't anyone tell me about her? Mr. Whitman's expression grew sad. There was a complicated family situation. Your mother and grandmother had a falling out years before you were born. When your mother died, your grandmother tried to get custody of you. But the state determined she was too old and in poor health. You were placed with the Morgans instead. My throat tightened. She tried to get me? She never stopped looking for you, Emma. She hired investigators. She fought the system. But by the time she found out where you were, you had already been legally adopted. The Morgans had full parental rights, and there was nothing she could do. I felt tears streaming down my face. She wanted me. Someone had actually wanted me. Mr. Whitman reached across and handed me a tissue. Before she passed, your grandmother created a trust in your name. She left you everything she had. Her estate, her property, her investments. Emma, you've just inherited $8.3 million. The world stopped. Couldn't breathe. Couldn't think. $8.3 million. If you're sitting there shocked like I was, wondering what happens next, do me a favor and subscribe to this channel. Because what I'm about to do with this money is going to change everything. The people who treated me like garbage are about to learn a lesson they'll never forget. Mr. Whitman continued talking, explaining trusts and taxes and legal procedures, but I could barely hear him over the pounding of my heart. I wasn't powerless anymore. I wasn't invisible. I had options. I had freedom. And I had a plan forming in my mind that would make the Morgans regret every cruel word they ever said to me. I didn't tell the Morgans about the inheritance. Not immediately. Mr. Whitman advised me to keep it quiet until all the legal paperwork was finalized, which would take about 2 weeks. Those 2 weeks were the longest and strangest of my life. I watched the Morgans with new eyes. Victoria's condescending remarks didn't sting anymore. Richard's indifference felt pathetic rather than painful. Preston's smug superiority was almost laughable. They had no idea that the girl they treated like a servant was now wealthier than they were. I started making plans. First, I hired Mr. Whitman to help me set up my finances properly. Then I contacted UMass and paid my entire 4-year tuition in full plus housing. I arranged for a trust fund that would give me a comfortable monthly allowance while keeping the principal invested and growing. But there was one thing I needed to do before I left this house forever. The morning after my high school graduation, I asked the Morgans to meet me in the living room. I had something important to discuss. Victoria looked annoyed at being summoned, but they all gathered, probably expecting me to beg for money one last time. I stood in front of them, my heart pounding but my voice steady. I wanted to let you know that I'll be moving out next week. I've made arrangements for my education and living expenses. You won't need to worry about me anymore. Victoria's eyebrows lifted slightly. Oh? And how exactly are you managing that? Did you find some boy to take care of you? No, I said calmly. I inherited money from my grandmother. Quite a lot of it, actually. Richard actually looked up from his newspaper. Your grandmother? I thought you had no family. So did I. Apparently, she spent years trying to find me. She left me her entire estate when she died. $8.3 million. The silence that followed was beautiful. Preston's mouth actually fell open. Victoria went pale. Richard set down his newspaper, suddenly very interested. 8 million? Victoria's voice was barely a whisper. 8.3, I corrected. After taxes and legal fees, I'll net about 6 million. More than enough to pay for school and start my life. Now Emma. Richard stood up, suddenly warm and fatherly. This is wonderful news. Of course, you'll want to invest that money wisely. I'd be happy to help you manage it through my firm. Family rates, naturally. I smiled coldly. Family? That's interesting. Because just 3 months ago, you told me I wasn't family. That Preston was your blood and I wasn't. Remember? Victoria's face flushed red. Emma, you're taking that out of context. We've always considered you part of this family. Really? I pulled out my phone and played a recording. I had started recording our dinner conversations weeks ago, just in case. Their own voices filled the room. Victoria saying I wasn't really her daughter. Richard refusing to help with college. Preston calling me a charity case. The color drained from Victoria's face as her own words echoed through the living room. Richard looked like he had been slapped. Preston, for once in his life, had nothing to say. I stopped the recording and put my phone back in my pocket. For 13 years, I lived in this house trying to earn your love. I cleaned, I studied, I stayed quiet. I smiled when you paraded me around at your charity events like some kind of trophy. And no matter what I did, it was never enough. Because you never wanted a daughter. You wanted a tax deduction and a story to tell at cocktail parties. Emma, please, Victoria started, but I held up my hand. I'm not finished. You made me feel worthless every single day. You told me I should be grateful for the scraps you threw me. You treated your housekeeper with more respect than you ever showed me. And when I needed help getting to college, you told me I was on my own. Richard tried a different approach, his businessman voice coming out. Now, let's be reasonable here. We provided for you. We gave you shelter, food, education. The bare minimum required by law, I said. And you made sure I knew it was a burden every single day. Margaret showed me more kindness in a week than you showed me in 13 years. Margaret, who had been listening from the doorway, had tears streaming down her face. So here's what's going to happen, I continued. I'm leaving next Friday. I've already rented an apartment in Boston near campus. I'm taking my belongings, which won't take long since I own almost nothing. And then I'm going to live my life without you in it. Preston finally found his voice. You're really going to throw away this family over some hurt feelings? I laughed, a real laugh, maybe the first genuine one I'd had in that house. Throw away what family, Preston? The family that told me I wasn't really part of it? I'm not throwing anything away. I'm walking away from people who never valued me in the first place. Victoria's mask finally cracked. Her voice came out desperate. Emma, we made mistakes. We can change. Don't do this. I looked at her, really looked at her, and felt nothing but pity. The thing is, Victoria, if you had just been kind to me, if you had treated me like I mattered even a little bit, I would have shared everything with you. I would have helped Preston with his student loans. I would have been a real daughter to you. But you made your choice 13 years ago, and now I'm making mine. Richard stood up, his face red with anger now. If you walk out that door, don't expect to come back. Don't expect anything from us ever again. I picked up my bag and walked toward the door. I stopped and looked back at them one last time. I never expected anything from you. That was always the problem. You made sure I knew I deserved nothing. Well, guess what? I'm worth $8.3 million and you get none of it. 5 years later, I stood in the lobby of my own office building in downtown Boston. Clark Foundation was etched in gold letters on the marble wall behind the reception desk. My foundation, built from my inheritance, grown through smart investments, and dedicated to helping foster children get the education and support they deserved. I was 23 years old, had just graduated from UMass with honors in business administration, and I was running a nonprofit that had already helped over 200 kids pay for college. Kids who reminded me of myself. Kids who deserved better than they got. Margaret worked with me now. I had hired her away from the Morgans 3 years ago, giving her a salary 3 times what they paid her, full benefits, and the title of Director of Operations. She had become the mother figure I always needed, and her wisdom helped shape every decision the foundation made. The Morgans tried to contact me exactly 3 times over those 5 years. The first time was 6 months after I left, when Richard's investment firm hit some trouble and he thought I might invest. I didn't respond. The second time was when Preston got engaged and Victoria wanted me at the wedding for appearances. I sent a polite decline. The third time was last month, when Richard had a health scare and suddenly wanted to reconcile with his adopted daughter. I thought about it for exactly 10 seconds, then deleted the email. I didn't need their apology. I didn't need their validation. I had built something real, something meaningful, something that helped people who actually needed help. Not for tax benefits or social status, but because I knew what it felt like to be invisible. My phone buzzed. It was David Whitman, my lawyer and now close friend. He was calling about a potential donor who wanted to contribute to the foundation. I answered, smiling. This is Emma Clark. As I talked through the details, I caught my reflection in the lobby window. I looked different from that scared 18-year-old girl who left Connecticut with 1 suitcase and a broken heart. I stood taller now. My eyes were brighter. I had found my purpose. That evening, I visited my grandmother's grave in a quiet cemetery outside Boston. I did this every month, bringing fresh flowers and talking to her like she could hear me. Thank you, Grandma Eleanor. I wish I had known you, but your gift gave me more than money. It gave me freedom. It gave me the power to become who I was meant to be. I hope I'm making you proud. The wind rustled through the trees, and for a moment, I could swear I felt a presence beside me. Warm, loving, proud. I had learned the hardest lesson of my life in that Connecticut mansion. Family isn't about blood or legal papers. It's about love, respect, and showing up for each other. The Morgans taught me what family isn't. Margaret, David, and the kids I helped through my foundation taught me what it is. And that made all the difference.